In this bonus episode, my guest, Dr. Ben Samuel, and I get into the future of AI and storytelling. So first, check out his main episode, number 8, if you haven't yet, as these are excerpts from our much longer conversation. But I wanted to include them because he gets into some really interesting details about the differences between types of AI storytelling creation and what we can do to keep AI a diverse and inclusive landscape, both from the tech side and the mindset and execution in our institutions and ourselves. So thank you for coming on this bonus journey with us. I appreciate you, and I think you're the best. For me, what makes you really special is your deep love of storytelling and seeing how that love of humanity and interacting with people comes out through your connections. And what I think is really interesting is when I think of computer scientist, I don't think heart-centered lead focused on storytelling. That's my baggage. So I apologize for prejudging. But I think that's why hearing about your projects, which we'll go into in a little bit, is so fascinating to me because you really do come from this storytelling and prioritizing humanity standpoint. And especially with the SAG after a strike, and we've been really talking about AI. You are an AI specialist who specializes in storytelling and the humanity of it.
Yes.
And so just the whole connective thread here for me of you taking these past experiences and then weaving them into your current art that is using the current technology, but for the best, is just really exciting and fascinating.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, I guess just to touch on some of that, I think that you are not necessarily wrong, that like there are a lot of computer scientists who don't necessarily put, I don't exactly know how to phrase it, but I think I humble myself to say that perhaps I do bring a little bit of a unique perspective. I think that oftentimes people do tend to maybe pigeonhole themselves into like one particular title or one particular like path. And I think that like sometimes it starts very early. I think it starts very young, and we like identify ourselves by, oh well, I am this and I am not that. Mm-hmm. And I think that it is, man, I want to watch my words carefully here. I think, I'm also like, I'm asking myself, what do I really believe? Mm-hmm. I definitely think it's the case that there are many people who either at a young age decide for themselves, I am technically minded or I am not technically minded.
Yeah.
And so for the people who identify as technically minded, they're going to lean into maybe those like career roles or career trajectories, like being a computer scientist, and they'll maybe feel a little, uncomfortable or like it's outside of their identity or comfort zone doing more like artistic things, and vice versa. I think people who decide for themselves, oh, I'm not interested in that, or I think not being interested in something is totally fine. Sadly, in the field of computer science, I think there are many people who identify as like not being good enough or not being smart enough to like go into that, and that is something that I try to like push back against.
Yeah,
like, anybody's capable of doing it if they want to, and they might not want to, and that's A-okay. But I guess I try to lead by example a little bit, that this is a false dichotomy, and the two actually like interweave with each other really, really beautifully, like,
and complement each other.
And complement each other, yeah. To be a computer scientist is to, in some ways, be an artist. It's to be a problem solver. It's to think of creative solutions to things. And if you're building my background is specifically in game development, but if you're building any piece of software, to think of a way to bring something into existence that did not exist before. I mean, that is
a creator.
Exactly. Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah.
And so I
See, you belong in this chair for like 5 reasons.
Oh, bro. Well, thank you. Happy that I haven't convinced you otherwise.
Yes, absolutely. I also need to say that I'm being unfair because one of my brothers, Chris, hello, Chris, is an amazing computer scientist as well. And so and wildly emotionally touched in and intelligent. And so I definitely know that you can have both, and it is a false dichotomy.
Yes.
I find myself, interestingly enough, I was just on a Zoom video call with my family. Hello, love you. Hi, Dad. Hi, Sam. And all 3 of them, I am the 4th least techie person in the call. Mm-hmm. They are all wildly more talented than me. And so I always have a little bit of a imposter syndrome in the tech world because of how talented my family is. And so I think I lean more into the emotional intelligence side. Whereas whenever I'm in artistic situations, a lot of times I get praise for how amazing my technical skills are. And I know they aren't. But I'm a committed learner and I'm fast at learning things. And so I can, in fact, pick things up quickly.
Yeah.
And so I just wonder, how many women, how many artists stay out of technical sides of things because they don't see themselves in that role. So I'd love to dig into that.
Yeah. So, okay. First of all, I do want to just say that, like, being talented at anything is, like, all relative. There's always going to be someone better at you than a thing, and always someone that you're going to be better at a thing. So I definitely would not sell yourself short, Jessica. It sounds to me like you probably are extremely technically minded, and so good job. And then the other thing about, I guess, representation of women in computer science, absolutely agree that is a huge problem, and I think that it is this kind of sadly self-fulfilling vicious cycle of there aren't necessarily as many women in the field as men, and so women growing up don't see themselves in those roles, and so they kind of like veer away from them, which then just sort of keeps the problem going. I don't think there's an incredibly simple solution to this. I think making sure that institutions hire more women is certainly a very important intervention that needs to happen. I know that something that I try very hard to do in the classroom is design my classes in such a way where I try not to, breed an air of toxicity. Sometimes I think there can be this almost toxic mindset of either you have it or you don't, you're good enough or you're not good enough. And I try to really create a sense of community and collaboration amongst my students. It's hard. It's hard for everybody. You're not doing yourself or anyone around you any favors if you have this kind of false macho attitude of, oh, this is so natural to me. If instead everybody kind of leans into and embraces the vulnerability of being stuck or scared or feeling dumb and using that as a tool to kind of create that sense of camaraderie of like, you're struggling with this? Me too. Amazing. Let's figure it out together. I don't necessarily know if that helps, women more than men, but I'm trying to just create environments of inclusivity.
I think that's so important. And also, it sounds like you're really focused on a growth mindset.
Yes.
Which is something that we all can benefit from. Yes. And allows us to see ourselves in different arenas. Something that we've talked about just a little bit is the differences in the kinds of AI. And so something you talked about beautifully was when we think of ChatGPT, we think of it goes and learns a bunch of facts and models. And then when I ask ChatGPT a question, it looks at all of that information and filters it from the question I give it. But it's really just kind of a filter of existing information.
Correct.
And we don't really know how that works. And that's part of what makes it interesting and also could be kind of scary.
Yeah.
But your work is very different, right?
Yes.
And the symbolic nature and the rules being kind of based in an anthropological and psychological model.
Yes, absolutely. Jessica, thank you so much. whereas ChatGPT and other large language models or things of that nature are sort of black boxes, the work in AI that I do is less focused on the sort of machine learning branch of AI and is more this symbolic approach that, generally speaking, is more interpretable. And like, we don't have to get down into this, but in the, academic, debate right now, the interpretability of AI is like of major concern.
And that's referring to how it got the answers that it got?
Exactly. Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Like how, what went into the answer that we got so that we can actually understand the biases that might be latent in the underlying model that produced those answers.
And for everybody that's listening, something that you have said in the past that helped me to understand this was basically for the ChatGPT model, we call that systematic, or what do you call that?
Statistical.
Statistical, thank you. So if we call that statistical, basically it's represented by numbers that to our eyes would look random, and so we can't know what information is in each little packet there. Is that kind of true-ish?
Absolutely true-ish. It's probably beyond the scope of this podcast to dive too deep into that. But yes, like there's definitely like a representation that is just like honest to gosh, like not capable of being interpreted by humans in these models that get created. We can like understand the algorithms that produce the models.
Yeah.
And certainly we can understand the output that the models create, but the model itself is this like unknowable thing. But it just so happens that when this very particular set of unknowable numbers are arranged in just this way, then when we put in this input, we actually get output that we really like. And so we just accept that I guess this is a good model.
That's wild.
It is crazy.
So there's kind of two sides of that. There's the unknowable nature of that, but then there's also the limits of the data set being things that already pre-exist and probably are historical and not necessarily representative of what we currently want to go to. And so we see this happening in our creative industries sometimes, of happening with models being created by AI for diversity, but they're pulling from really grossly outdated or racist and sexist models to then, and it's just perpetuating some pretty horrible things.
Exactly. It perpetuates it. And yet, because people can kind of like point at, oh, well, the algorithm did it, a computer did it, therefore it must be right. And like, no. Like it is drawing from data that very much so like was determined purely by humans in the past. And like humans, of course, are capable of bias and error, either through ignorance or flat out maliciousness. And then also like the algorithms itself that produce those models. Made by humans. So there is a lot of humanity at play, even in these technical processes, and for good and for ill.
And then you had talked about a hiring process that kind of perpetuated that. Could you just touch on that?
I mean, this is just like one of many examples. But like Amazon, they, to my knowledge, they do not do this anymore, but there was a moment where they were experimenting with like an AI model to help make hiring decisions. So they created the model based on previous people that they had hired, saying, oh, well, these are the people that we hired, so these are the types of people that we're excited about. And then now that they have this model, in theory, they can input new resumes, and instead of having to laboriously interview all these people or look through these things, they can just have the model, have the machine say, oh, we should give this person an interview, or oh no, this person's not going to be a good fit for us, which in theory sounds like it would save the company a lot of time, doesn't sound bad. But again, if you're drawing from historical data that has biases in it, and so as was the case in this situation, their historical hires tended, as you say, to be racist and sexist or misogynistic, it just meant that like the qualities that they were looking at in the new resumes weren't actually their honest to gosh qualifications. It wasn't things like, oh, how many years of programming experience you have or what previous titles have you had. It was looking at like ridiculous things that should not make an impact. Like, oh, is this a name that is commonly associated with women, basically, or something like that, because historically they weren't hiring many women, as an example.
And I thought that example was really useful for me because actually it's just the machines showing us what we typically do as humans. And so there's actually something kind of cool there that it's showing us, hey, you are making decisions based on what's happened and worked in the past, and you're blinding yourself to who's not at the table.
Absolutely. And but it's, we're touched on this idea of like interpretability. Like, it's not immediately obvious that it is in fact even doing that, because all you see is the output of like, yes, hire this person, or no, don't hire this person. And then it takes someone kind of doing an intervention and like looking at, oh my gosh, like I think I'm detecting a pattern here, to kind of realize that like, oh, maybe our model is looking at elements of the resume that we don't actually want it to be caring about. But yes, in theory, once we get to a point where we're able to better interpret the actual thought process behind this, and there is research that is being done in interpretable AI and human in the loop AI, things like that, then yes, absolutely, I think it can do a really good job of shining that spotlight and maybe helping us be better at the problems.
I think that's like a cool way that AI is, maybe not on purpose, but is helping us kind of see our blind spots as humans.
Absolutely.
But what's really interesting to me about the work you do is it's actually in the symbolic side of AI.
Yes.
And how does that differ you've talked about how it's, instead of kind of being a blind, black box that we can't see into, you can go into the code, I think it is, and be able to see, like, I had this output. So then you can change the rules and adapt them and see where it's going.
Exactly, yeah. And so there are trade-offs between the two, and there are certainly, like, people that, feel very passionately one way or the other. With symbolic AI, there's a lot more kind of authoring effort involved. There's kind of a much higher upfront cost, because you're not just scraping a lot of like initial data essentially to power your model. In some ways you're creating it from scratch, if you will, for each new project. And on the one hand, some people might turn their nose up at that and say, oh, that sounds awfully laborious and tedious. But for me, I think it works very nicely, because what it actually means is that the process of creating this AI system, or creating a, project or game or what have you that is powered by an AI system, is an honest to gosh like act of authoring. Like, you are actually creating the rules that govern this system, and that then becomes an opportunity of self-expression. It becomes an opportunity of storytelling. So this isn't necessarily a game that I worked on, but me and several of my colleagues in the Expressive Intelligence Studio developed an AI system called Comme il faut, which roughly translates to like what is proper, or like what as it should be, like in terms of like etiquette. And it's a system that enables non-expert authors, or like non-technical expert authors, to write rules that can then inform the behavior of AI characters.
So I could come in and kind of create a subworld that has characters and rules, and I could bring my story to yours.
That is exactly right. And that's one of the big sort of like, I don't know, like agendas of my research, is trying to enable as many people to tell their stories as possible in this domain that like sometimes feels inaccessible, that sometimes feels like, oh, well, in order to do that, I need a PhD in computer science, and I want to...
I just need to be friends with someone.
Exactly.
A PhD in computer science.
So like one project that I've worked on, the V-Space project, which is in collaboration with Louisiana State University in Baton Rouge, but also through the University of Nantes in France, is a project that is reconstructing a 18th century Parisian theater that burned down. So we don't really have a lot of historical documents of it. And the project, the vSpace project, is reconstructing it in virtual reality, not only architecturally, so not, pouring through the limited visuals that we have and trying to create like a virtual 3D model of it, but also reconstructing it socially, if you will. So as part of that project, we had workshops. We gathered together French scholars, so French historians, French literary experts, people who don't have a background in computer science, but who are better equipped than maybe anybody else to be able to understand and speak to French propriety of the era.
That's perfect. And it's such a good example of there really were social rules that we can then program into the system, and you have built the structure to take that.
Exactly. And so we gathered these people to encode these rules and then use that to inform the behavior of the AI characters in this VR game.
I think that's so fascinating. And we've talked about the possibilities of using it on a sci-fi script. And so then it can kind of interpolate the scientific experts could put in information, and then the narrative could go in, and the what's possible in this world can combine and give us more information.
Absolutely. So different people with their different sets of expertise can kind of focus on different elements. You kind of like throw it all in the AI pot, if you will, tell it to go, and then like see what comes up, and also have there be like, interactivity, like let players or users like actually engage with the characters and have them be informed by, again, the rules that all of these experts represent. And because it's this more symbolic thing, if you ever see something that seems problematic or unintentional or surprising, I guess, first of all, I should say, oftentimes surprise is delightful.
Absolutely.
Surprise is not always problematic. Sometimes surprise is beautiful. But because we can trace things back to these rules, we can always see, this is why characters behaved in this particular way. And then you, as like the author of the system, can decide for yourself, is this a good thing or a bad thing? Like, am I happy that my system surprised me in this way? Or is this a sign that I actually need to kind of like go back in and like add more safeguards to like, sometimes I think of it as almost like an act of like sculpture, like sculpt the possibility space of the simulation so that it's only capable of presenting things that adhere to my artistic vision.
That's beautiful. Yeah, absolutely. You're giving it the less beautifully, like the guide rails of of this behavior. You get to explore this sandbox, but not outside of the sandbox.
Yes, correct.
Okay.
Yes.
That's really interesting. Or if in my sci-fi example, we learn something about the rules of science, or we have a discovery, we can then go back in and without scrapping the whole project, you can go in and make an adjustment to the rules if you get new information.
Yeah. If I'm understanding, like if that new information sparks like a new idea of like, that's really great. Let's like create additional, let's let characters be like care more about this particular thing. You can go in and
that's very cool.
Join the community and share your creative challenges on Instagram and Facebook at Creators Cafe by Kika Labs. And also check out my website, kikalabs.com, KIKALABS.com, to sign up for the mailing list so you always know when a new podcast is released, and to check out my coaching and digital courses to help you be a more confident and joyful creator.